Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session of the USAf CHE conference, Higher Education Conference. This is the second USAf conference, and we're very pleased to be able to welcome you to this session. This session is a session that was put together by the World of Work Strategy Group at USAf. And the World of Work Strategy Group really focuses on all aspects of the intersection between the universities and the world of work. And clearly the issues around the fourth industrial revolution, this new technology moment we are in is a critically important one and is a part of that World of Work Strategy Group. Today, the focus this afternoon is on universities and the 4IR labor market. And we are extremely pleased to have a wonderful collection of speakers, Professor Marwala, Dr. Obokoh, and Mr. Daan Toit. And the three speakers will be part of the first session. And then I'll hand over to Professor Mbati, who is the Vice-Chancellor at Sepako Bokhato University. And he'll take on the next session, which will be bringing in some inputs from our respondents. So each of the speakers in the first session will have 15 minutes. And we are going to kick off with Professor Marwala, who really doesn't need any introduction. He's the Vice-Chancellor at the University of Johannesburg, and actually is a member of the USAf World of Work Strategy Group. But just to, his bio is available in the program that was sent out and the prospectus that was sent out. And prior to being at the University of Johannesburg, where he was also Dean of Engineering, he was at the University of Witwatersrand. He was, before that, he was a technical director at South African Breweries. He has an illustrious academic career. He's one of the most prolific writers in South Africa. He has published 20 books, more than 20 books, and 300 papers in publications, by the way, in journals. I mean, what that means, that's an outstanding kind of output, if you like. And so I'm not going to go further, but you could have a look at the rest of his bio in the prospectus. He is really one of South Africa's treasures. So, Professor Marwala, I'm going to hand over to you for 15 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawa. Indeed, I'm supposed to unmute. I hope someday we are going to develop a piece of technology which will know my intention to speak and unmute itself without any prompting. I would like to thank all of you for attending this session. On Youth Day in 2019, President Cyril Ramaphosa proclaimed that South Africa's burgeoning youth unemployment rate was a national crisis. Unsurprisingly, we did not need this declaration to confirm it. We have long had the rolling statistics, and it takes little more than a stepping out of your gate to see the sheer levels of poverty and inequality rampant in our society. This, of course, was the grim state of affairs even before the COVID-19 pandemic. The latest statistics show that unemployment in South Africa is at more than a decade high, sitting almost at 35% mark. This did not even include discouraged workers, which puts the estimate closer to the 45% mark and even higher. In fact, South Africa's unemployment rate surged to the highest on a global list of 82 countries monitored by Bloomberg. In particular, unemployment continues to burden the youth, with nearly 2/3 or 64.4% of those aged between 15, and 24 years unemployed, and 42.9% of those aged between 25 to 34 years unemployed. It is apparent that we need a rehaul and rethink on what is to be done to get this unemployment rate to an acceptable level. This feeds into some of the recommendations of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which was released last year and was adopted by South Africa's cabinet and gazetted. In particular, to resolve the issue of unemployment and to deal with the issue of increasing the competitiveness of South Africa's economy, because you cannot deal with the issue of unemployment without dealing with the issue of competitiveness. The Commission calls for a redesign of our human capacity development that will link our entire pool of potential employees with productive and decent work. In order to achieve this, a comprehensive view of the entire human capital system must be developed, and the leverage points which can be accelerated by the Fourth Industrial Revolution need to be identified. Education, because of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is accordingly being redefined in many sectors in many universities in our sectors. I'm joined by an esteemed panel of speakers who will speak to the role of universities and the Fourth Industrial Revolution labor market against an ever-changing, uncertain context. Of course, this session, which is being chaired by Professor Ahmed Bawa, the CEO of University South Africa, will also comprise of two esteemed speakers, Dr. Nompumelelo Obokoh, the board chairperson of the National Research Foundation, Independent Science for Development Council member, and CGIAR, and Mr. Daan, the Deputy Director General of International Cooperation and Resources in the Department of Science and Innovation. And of course, this should naturally include labor market analysis and review and identifying some of the mega trends in the post-school education and training. Of course, as we kick this session, I'm reminded of Professor Bawa's words in an article earlier this year, and I quote, "Clearly there are ways in which this higher education system can work better. It has an unacceptable throughput rate, its articulation with the world of work can be improved, and its capacity to fill the gap between research and innovation all require attention. Thinking of higher education as a site of investment rather than as a site of expenditure shifts the national imagination of the role of higher education," close quote. As we get into the rest of the panelists, I would like to bring to the fore some of the most important aspects of what needs to be done as far as the Fourth Industrial Revolution is concerned. I have already talked about the issue of building human capacity, especially in areas related to the Fourth Industrial Revolution. These are areas of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, biotechnology, 3D printing, and so on and so forth. This necessarily means that the whole old idea of adult-based education is no longer just directed at making people learn how to read or write, but also to make them literate in these new mega technologies that are going to define our era. Secondly, as a nation, we need to consolidate the activities around the application of artificial intelligence in all areas of our economy, be in manufacturing, agriculture, whether it is in transportation, so that we can actually be able to bring these industries, modernize them, and be able to respond to the issue of competitiveness and create economic value, ultimately dealing with the issue of unemployment. Then there is the issue of reindustrialization. South Africa has deindustrialized for no other reason except the fact that we are no longer competitive in many of our sectors. And the only way we are going to bring back competitiveness, we will have to invest in the technology of the fourth industrial revolution, be it in the automation in our automotive industry or any other industry, so that we can make our industries competitive and create value for our economy. The other thing is the issue of data. There's often been said that data is actually the new oil. What we ought to do is to avail and secure data. You have to avail it. If you just go to our hospitals, huge amounts of X-ray images have been collected, which if they are made available, then people can build AI decision systems that can be used to modernize our health sector. But that cannot just be availed without security, because there are issues of privacy that need to be respected. And I say this knowing very well what is happening in the United States with a company called Facebook and the way it has dealt with vital issues such as privacy. So we need to make sure that data is made available, but it is secured to protect people. Then there is the issue of incentives. One economist was asked, summarize the whole of economics in one word. And his answer was incentives. When you have incentives, you have demand, you have supply, you have all sorts of issues that are vital to make an economy dynamic. So we need to incentivize the adoption of these technologies. The Chinese have come up with the idea of a special economic zone. That is an incentive scheme. And we have adopted that system. But the question is, what is that incentive that these special economic zones are going to offer? Is it tax breaks? Is it a dual sector model that makes it favorable for companies to invest in those areas? Whatever it is, we need to incentivize the adoption of these technologies if we have any hope of making our economy competitive. Then the issues of infrastructure. The issue of infrastructure is very, very important, and naturally we have to talk about the issue of spectrum for higher education, because spectrum is very, very important in our research, in our ability to communicate with our students. So rather than just awarding it to telecommunication companies, I think hospitals, the health sector must have its own spectrum. I think higher education must also have its own spectrum. And other infrastructure that will improve connectivity. And we need to get the Universal Services Agency, USAF, to work to create connectivity in those areas where the market forces are not able to do so. Then there are issues of rules, regulations, laws, guidelines. I was just in a committee of the World Health Organization that was finalized guidelines for the implementation of artificial intelligence in medicine. All sectors of our economy require their own industry-specific guidelines. Then ultimately, it is all about implementation. We talk quite a great deal as a country. What we ought to do as a country is actually to get into the implementation mode so that we can turn some of these ideas into economic value. I thank you very much, Professor Bawa, and I'm looking forward to listening to the rest of the speakers.
Thank you so much, Professor Marwala, and as usual, sort of provocative, pushing the kind of the limits and in particular, of course, just the age-old challenge we face in South Africa, which is to move from theory and talk to implementation. And I think that that's really a critical issue for us as we head into the future. Thank you so much for that, and we'll be we'll come back to some of those ideas, I think, as we go through this session. It gives me great pleasure now to welcome Professor Nompumelelo Obokoh, who's a really important person for USAf and for the universities. She's the chair of the board of the NRF. Dr. Obokoh, many years ago, I was the chair of the Foundation for Research Development Board. That was years and years ago. It seems like almost a lifetime ago. But it's really wonderful to welcome you to this USAf conference. So just a few words about Professor Obokoh, Dr. Obokoh. She holds a PhD in plant biotechnology from the University of Cambridge, a very prestigious institute. They call it Institute of Biotechnology. She is, as I mentioned, currently the chair of the NRF, of the board of the NRF, and is a member of the Science for Development Council for the CGIAR, which is in Montpellier in France. The CGIAR is a consultative group for international agricultural research. It's a body that really galvanizes international partnerships on agricultural research, and a very prestigious kind of body. It's funded by a number of very substantial foundations and development agencies. She has served as Professor Marwala. She has served as a commissioner on the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and is managing a private consultancy firm called, you'll have to help me pronounce this, but I guess it's Langassi. Langassi, yes, Pty Limited. And what that does is that it provides specialized advisory services on gender-responsive, climate-smart agricultural practices and biotechnology. So she's very much at the heart of the huge challenge around food security, and really an extraordinarily important kind of arena for engagement, if you like. Dr. Obokoh, you have 15 minutes. I'll hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawa, and for the introduction, and also to Professor Marwala, really for setting the tone. And let me share the presentation quickly. So I'm very much happy, and good afternoon, colleagues, to share some perspectives on the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. As Professor Bawa has introduced, I served as a commissioner on the PC for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and really the 32 members of the Presidential Commission, ably led by the Deputy Chairperson, Professor Marwala, as you can see there in the picture, produced a strategic focus for South Africa to effectively participate in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The proposed dream or the vision for the country in the Fourth Industrial Revolution era is that South Africa will have a globally competitive, inclusive, and shared economy with a technological capability and production capacity that is driven by people harnessing the Fourth Industrial Revolution to propel the country forward towards its social and economic goals. I think that was also quite well alluded by Professor Marwala in his introductory remarks. And the report of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution was thus promulgated in the Government Gazette on the 23rd of October 2020 as Notice 591 of 2020. Indeed, in delivering its mandate, the Commission really divided its work into 8 work streams, which are covering integration, program management, communication, socio-economic impact, science, technology and innovation, infrastructure and resources, human capital and the future of the world of works, and the capital markets and financing, as well as commercialization and industrialization. And key, of course, to provide an enabling environment for the fourth industrial revolution to thrive are policies and the legal framework in South Africa. At the end of the work, of course, the report make 4 key recommendations, which includes investment in human capital, really noting that its people are South Africa's greatest opportunity and greatest resources. And second, as part of the recommendation, is the development or establishment of an artificial intelligence institute, which is the bedrock technology in the fourth industrial revolution, underpinning the growing connections in cyber, physical, and biological systems. And also understanding that the research and development, as well as the implementation capabilities in AI, are critical and must be embedded within the state. These also will enable the generation of new knowledge and creation and creative technology applications in key sectors such as health, agriculture, education, energy, manufacturing, tourism, ICT, and amongst others. The Commission further recommended the establishment of a platform for advanced manufacturing and for new material production, understanding that this will form part of the revival of the country's manufacturing sector. And so that to be successful in the context of the 4IR, it is therefore imperative that the manufacturing sector be supported by a state-led research initiative focusing on advanced manufacturing and application of new materials, especially through technologies in 4IR that will really enhance the agricultural sector, construction, housing, health, energy storage, environmental sustainability, as we see now with the crisis, climate crisis, as well as electric vehicles. On the fourth recommendation, the Commission endorsed securing and availing data to enable innovation. The principal opportunity in the 4IR is the storage of large sums of data, which is supposed to be reliable, as well as accurate, standardized, integrated, and easily accessible. This is citizen data for building an e-government services across key sectors such as health, transport, and justice. However, this opportunity, of course, must be safeguarded by securely organizing public data through the bolstering of cybersecurity capacity and capabilities. Other recommendations includes incentivizing future industries, platforms, and applications of the fourth industrial revolution technologies. And in building the 4IR infrastructure as the sixth recommendation, it is important to incorporate the 4IR infrastructure into the overall planning for infrastructure development and deployment. Hence, biotechnology, 3D printing, and the digital economy will require a stable and an enhanced infrastructure base. The seventh recommendation requires the review, amendment, or creation of new policies and legislation. And finally, the recommendation covers the establishment of the 4IR Strategic Implementation Coordination Council. For the purpose of this presentation, and as well as looking at the time slot that we've been given, and also the theme, which is the World of Work Strategy Group, Universities, and the Labor Market, I thought it would be good and beneficial that we focus on the work stream that covers the human capital and the future world of works. Just to provide some context in terms of our situation in the country, we are currently at 60.3 million people, and the figure is projected to grow to between 66 to 67 million by 2030. And currently, 2/3 of our population are below the ages of 35. This is often presented as an opportunity because more people are available for productive work. However, as we all know, as earlier alluded by Professor Marwala, is that the greatest struggle facing the South African youth is unemployment. And this has really worsened under the COVID-19 pandemic. However, a lot of our South African youth are also unequipped to produce productive work in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. Thus, a skilled, capable, technologically advanced workforce will be required for South Africa really to exploit the opportunities presented by the fourth industrial revolution. And this will require continuous learning and keeping pace with the rate of development and change that makes 4IR, that the 4IR makes the norm. South Africa really requires a 4IR human capital development strategy that will look at how we develop the future workforce and the skills in the country that addresses those who are neither in employment nor in education as well. And looking at the challenges really and opportunities for our education system. Our public education system, as we know, is severely underperforming in equipping our learners with the necessary skills to become productive labor participants. Our schooling system does not have an overt focus on creating learner competency in creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving. Thus, the exclusion of the arts as a priority learning area is also a limiting factor, especially when it regards to creative thinking and problem-solving ability for the youth. The inclusion of STEMI, that is your science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, innovation, and entrepreneurship subject, is becoming a focus worldwide as preparation for the 21st century skills, where the arts and humanities play a very big role in facilitating creative thinking, and also it elevates learning of the STEM subjects. So in South Africa, where the STEM is at the beginning stages of being introduced, we have therefore an opportunity to implement STEMI approaches from the outset. And looking at the labor markets and the future of work, the changes that the new technologies such as AI, Internet of Things, blockchain, big data analytics, biotechnology, nanotechnology, 3D printing, and so forth are beginning and will continue to introduce in business and industrial production practices which will have a notable impact on South Africa's labor market. A key challenge in South Africa really relates to two key labor market characteristics, that is unemployment and underemployment, both of which have been attributed in part to a seeming skills mismatch. And evident among our recent graduates that one of the factors associated with youth unemployment crisis is the lack of skills and qualifications that are relevant to the sectors of the economy in which there are employment opportunities. And these features, which are very critical, a critical segment of our labor market, represent a failure to leverage the potential economic benefits of a youthful population. And it also constrains the possibilities for and the pace for migrating to high skills economy, such as the digital and the AI-driven one. Thus, a 4IR fit human capacity is an important feature and a key consideration in establishing an environment for private sector growth and competitiveness. So when we look at the jobs for the future, the WEF, that is the World Economic Forum report, indicates that existing jobs which are expected to increase in demand up to 2020 will include your e-commerce, social media specialists, data analysts, data scientists, software developers, application developers, which are technology-based jobs. And other jobs which really will grow include those that require people skills such as organizational development specialists, sales and marketing professionals, learning specialists, customer service workers, and people and culture specialists. AI, machine learning, big data, information security analysts, blockchain specialists, biotechnologists, robotics engineers, and human-machine interaction designers are also among some of the new specialist roles which are required as we transition to the 4IR era. And above all of these technical and digital skills, the soft skills are very crucial, especially when you look at complex problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, creativity, people management, communication, negotiation, etc. These are core competencies that will allow workers to add value that machines cannot, and fulfill functions and tasks that only human beings are capable of. So really, going forward, what will set human beings apart from machines is creativity. So having said that, as we know that South Africa's greatest opportunity and our greatest resource is our people, and therefore it is important that we really invest in developing 4IR ready skill sets. So the 4IR is giving us a rallying point of agency and an opportunity to redesign, streamline, and align the education system through a coordinated, robust, and multi-stakeholder process. So the purpose really for the next version of our skills ecosystem will be to leapfrog our youth into productive work and reskill current workers for job retention and ongoing productive work in the economy. Thus, the skills demand of the 4IR era requires stackable competencies which are industry aligned, and they'll allow people to enter and exit the system at multiple points as part of a lifelong learning process. Therefore, it is important that we invest in strategic projects for mass skills development, which will be scaled for exponential skills pipeline development and labor market absorption. When you look at the sectors such as agriculture, health, energy, mining, environmental, transport, the financial services and the tourism sectors, as well as the creative industries, they provide this immediate opportunity for the mass skilling programs. What it says is that all sectors of society will need to be prepared not only to reskill, but to approach skilling as a continuous process. So having said that, the Commission really proposes a human-centered 4IR agenda that will look really at investing in people, investing in their institutions of work, and investing in decent and sustainable work. Understanding that I'm only left with a few minutes, in conclusion, the 4IR is a solution and a tool to be harnessed so that the future of work is one that is inclusive and beneficial for all the citizens in the country. And to compete globally, South Africa will need to foster an economy that empowers its citizens with the necessary future-fit skills. South Africa has also to consider the economic significance of what is happening in the context of low growth and major skills and social backlogs like the abnormally high structural unemployment that we are facing currently. South Africa has to innovate its curriculum design and adapt the way that it creates and prepares the young people for the new world of work. Thus, urgent reskilling, upskilling efforts are needed, focusing in particular on strengthening higher education and adult learning. South Africa has to examine and contend with creating the challenge of generating these new skills for the new era, while dealing with a massive skills backlog from the third industrial revolution era, and giving meaning to the belief and mantra that no citizen should be left behind. Thus, our human capital strategy has to acknowledge that many of our sectors are still operating in the third industrial revolution space. And as we are focusing on the future areas of work, we have to strengthen current sectors for job retention, for job creation, and a transition from the current to the future ready scenarios. Thus, how we respond to the future of work largely depends on how we prepare today. And with that, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to come and share some of this perspective from the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Thank you, Bonga.
Thank you so much, Dr. Obokoh. That was absolutely kind of just comprehensive, and I think it just points out to what we have to take on, as the education sector, starting in basic education and building up. And I'd like to thank you for that. It's very comprehensive and spot on time. Thank you so much. It gives me great. Thank you. It gives me great pleasure now to welcome Mr. Daan du Toit, who's started his career in South African government with what was at that time the Department of Foreign Affairs, where he trained as a diplomat. And since 2002, he's been attached to the Department of Science and Innovation, and he was a science attaché, or whatever the terminology is in Brussels. And I think, Daan, if I can remember, I think that's where I first met you, I think in Brussels, many years ago. And of course, at the moment, he's the Deputy Director General responsible for the international cooperation and resources. So So clearly, you know, again, somebody who's very connected with the higher education system, because so much of kind of university, so much of our work is to work with international partners and so on. So what I'd like to do is, again, his portfolio, his bio is in the program document, so I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but just to welcome him to speak to us today on this topic. Thank you so much, Daan. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawa, for that introduction. That is much appreciated. And indeed, good afternoon to everyone who's joining the session. My first task is just to bring you the good wishes and apology of our department's Director General, Dr. Phil Majwacha, who's unable to join the session as invited, but he has asked me to represent him. And our task, really building on the excellent presentations from Professor Marwala and Dr. Obokoh, is to put the question of the focus on the world of work within the framework of South Africa's new decadal plan for science, technology and innovation. Now, I certainly hope that everyone in the audience from the university sector and all those of an interest in the university sector would be aware of this decadal plan, because it's certainly not a decadal plan for the Department of Science and Innovation. It is not a decadal plan for government. It is indeed a decadal plan for all of South Africa. And this 10-year plan is really about how do we use science, technology and innovation to respond to the challenges our country faces today, but also to prepare for the future. So questions such as what will the world of work look like? What are the implications for the labor market? The interface of universities with the fourth industrial revolution. These are all key questions which the decadal plan considers as we seek to continue to guide our investments in science, technology and innovation to prepare South Africa for the future. So very, very briefly then, just some background on the decadal plan, which will be for the period 2022 to 2031. This is the implementation plan for South Africa's new white paper on science, technology and innovation, which colleagues and the audience may remember was approved by our cabinet in 2019. We're in the very final stages of finalizing the decadal plan for final approval by our cabinet. Cabinet had approved the plan earlier in the year for finalization, and very soon this plan will be launched. Just as Professor Marwala has indicated and Dr. Obokoh, this plan, like the work of the Presidential Commission, is firmly contextualized within the implementation of South Africa's National Development Plan. And of course, since COVID-19 becomes one of the instruments, it will become one of the instruments for implementing our economic reconstruction and recovery plan. And on the global level, it's very much responding to the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the plan draws input. There's been widespread consultation. And again, I hope that many in the audience would have been part of that consultation. Certainly, there's been engagement with University of South Africa and others. But most importantly, it draws on some activities, and apologies for the acronyms, such as the Higher Education, Science and Technology Innovation Landscape Review our Minister has commissioned, and others. Of course, very importantly, we can talk about plans and make plans, but we have to be aware of our reality. And that reality currently in South Africa and across the world really is also one where our fiscal resources are constrained. That is no secret. It means we have to plan smarter and we have to plan better. And I think then just again, the point I wanted to emphasize, this is not a plan for the Department of Science and Innovation. It's the whole of government, it's the whole of society approach, and therefore very crucial role for our university sector. The plan seeks to achieve 5 what we call of system goals. Firstly, to make sure that South Africa becomes a more enabling environment for innovation, that we become more innovation friendly. We know that because of the outstanding output from our university sector, South Africa punches above its weight when it comes to research, but we struggle with translating those research outputs into new products and services. So focus on making South Africa a more enabling environment for innovation. And within that, there's a specific focus on what are the skills and innovation capabilities our citizens and organizations need. And then very important for the purpose of this presentation, one of the system goals is to expand and future-proof, prepare for the future, South Africa's human capabilities. The other system goals, just very briefly, look at expanding and transforming the research system. How do we build a more inclusive and coordinated national system of innovation? And by that, We refer to the sets of relationships between all those involved in science, technology, and innovation. Very importantly, how do we increase funding and make funding more efficient? And all of this is supported by expanded and more strategic international cooperation, as well as monitoring, evaluation, and policy learning. Again, as Professor Bawa said, also for the university sector, international cooperation is absolutely crucial. Just very important to give you some insights into the governance framework. This will be a plan which at its highest level will be overseen by our president, because it's foreseen that the president will convene what will be known as the Science and Innovation Presidential Plenary, which will bring together all senior government, business, academia, civil society leaders. It will be supported by a dedicated interministerial committee, bringing together different cabinet ministers working in the area of science and innovation together. And I'm sure the university sector will welcome that enhanced cooperation and coordination within government. And this body of leaders, which really brings all of South Africa together, will then adopt something which we refer to as the Science and Innovation Compact, which will be a high-level commitment to joint, for example, joint research and development plans, to how we use public procurement to stimulate local technology development, how do we better manage intellectual property, but crucially for the purpose of this presentation, what is the joint-up effort of Team South Africa to invest in education and skills development. Just in the philosophy behind the plan, a few words. It's really about building a science and technology and innovation system that impacts for the benefit of all in South Africa, but achieves a balance between that impact, such as through inclusive innovation, through other interventions, which make sure that we continue to develop and grow our science, technology, and innovation system. And then these are really mutually reinforcing. So that is important then to dispel a rumor, as sometimes it's stated, that we will be abandoning basic science or social sciences and the humanities. Not at all. On the contrary, for the well-being, and this was also emphasized by Dr. Obokoh in her presentations, those domains need increased and smarter investment, but within the context of the challenges South Africa face. Now, the plan is constructed around these societal challenges, which were identified through work, a foresight study, which was done by our National Advisory Council on Innovation. So it's really all about society. How does investment in science, technology, innovation, and education speaks to the challenges we as a country face? So it's the societal challenges which are important. It's not a technology focus areas, because they will really come forth in a demand-driven and bottom-up development as we really mobilize the capacities and resources of the entire science system to respond to these challenges. And then, very important, if you've already seen a draft of the plan, if you see a future version of the plan, if a discipline is not specifically mentioned in the plan, that doesn't mean that discipline will not be supported, because it's really about how do we use science, innovation, and education to respond to the societal challenges. So the Decadal Plan then identifies a number of thematic priorities. This speaks to key societal challenges such as health, energy, adaptation to climate change. How do we make service delivery more efficient in South Africa through, for example, innovation for a capable state? But then, very importantly, for the purpose of our discussion this afternoon, how do we use science and technology to prepare for South Africa's education needs for the future, and indeed for the future of society? And I will say a little bit more about this thematic priority on education for the future. These are just some examples then what you will see in the plan on what the investment or priority areas is in the different societal grand challenges. So starting with education and skills for the future, there's a focus on curriculum development, on how do we use better digital technologies for education. The investment in engineering sciences, which we need, is lacking, a more transdisciplinary approach, etc. Just briefly related onto the 4IR, under the future of society, there's a strong focus really taking the guidance, because it's about one government working together from the recommendations of the Presidential Commission on developing an ethical framework for artificial intelligence in South Africa. So then when we look specifically at the societal, the system goal to increase and expand South Africa's human capabilities, the plan speaks to the specific objectives. How do we increase our high end, which is really PhD level human capabilities in South Africa as a driver for innovation. What is the investments? And again, Professor Marwala spoke about this with Dr. Obokoh on workplace learning and really integrate that workplace learning as an integral part of our education system. And then to emphasize again the point of investment in humanities and societal challenge, social sciences, because we need that. If we're going to harness technologies, including the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, we need that holistic approach. So the work which was being done within the Decadal Plan is to align the development of human capabilities in these thematic priorities identified by the Decadal Plan with the other priorities, such as, for example, in the different master plans for different industries or sectors, work which was led by our colleagues in the Department of Industry, Trade and Industry and Competition. And then how do we holistically use the different resources in government for smarter investment, investment in our universities and technologies, our community education and training colleges, the sector education training authorities, the science councils, the different national facilities, state-owned enterprises. How do we use this pool of capabilities and resources in an integrated and a strategic manner to develop the human capabilities which South Africans need? So then just by way of example, in the plan sets out then a number of interventions with action plans. For example, and I think this will be of interest to the audience, how do we enhance our enrollment planning? And this is obviously not something the Department of Science and Innovation will lead, but our colleagues in our sister department of higher education and training as a state steering mechanisms to make sure that we have a better mix of students in this post-school education and training system which correspond to the priority areas of our economy. We cannot run away from this, the funding question, and how do we work together with National Treasury and others to ensure a more sustainable financial ecosystem for student funding. I already spoke about the integration of the CETAs and the state-owned enterprises in partnership with universities to build the intermediate R&D skills we will need certainly to respond to the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution. We will need to ongoing review of the program and quality mix. Again, work which the HET and the CHET will lead in to determine whether these programs actually respond to the needs of our economy. The plan foresees the implementation of a digital track platform, which will track, of course, all data privacy and other regulations taking into account for postgraduate students, so that we know where do we invest, where do the students go, where are they active, so what lessons can we learn from that. Specifically, it foresees investment in enhancing our capability, our national capability for skills forecasting, and then, as I think Dr. Obokoh also mentioned, emphasize support for entrepreneurship development. So these are just some of the interventions by way of example, I think the ones most relevant for this afternoon, which the plan sets out. I thought it would also be important just to briefly look at another system goal, and that is the expanded and transformed research system, which really is all about how do we expand and transform the research base in South Africa through fast-tracking implementation of the staffing of South African universities framework, which our colleagues at DHET led, and I'm sure needs no introduction for this audience, but making sure that our research, our investment efforts in these domains speaks to the objectives of the Decadal Plan and specifically those of the fourth industrial revolution. It includes building enhancing the research capabilities of our historically disadvantaged institutions. How do we enhance PhD qualification at our different science councils and national levels? And I think then very importantly, instituting dedicated programs for industry-based research as the promotion of so-called industry-based master and doctoral programs. We think that will be absolutely essential for our investment in skills development for the different disruptive technologies. And then just moving towards conclusion, as I said, there are the different thematic priorities, societal challenges in the plan. One is focused on education for the future and the future of society. It speaks to the problem statement Dr. Obokoh had eloquently set aside of our current poor education outcomes, and then the dangers, of course, or the risks, but of course opportunities, not only risks posed by digital technologies and automation, and how do we make sure the existing digital divide doesn't widen. Now, In the Decadal Plan, it's again very important. It's not a plan in isolation. It's integrated. It's linked to the National Plan for Post-School Education and Training and the National Digital and Future Skills Strategy, which is led by our sister department for communication and digital technologies. And here we, for example, foreseen how do we leverage our investment in different data science, high-speed research, research networking, large data set management, supercomputing, training, and infrastructure programs to really make sure that we, as an support the education and the science system for the science of the future, which of course will be data driven and e-science. What are the infrastructure investments we need and different capabilities to make better and more efficient use of online training courses? This is specifically foreseen in the plan. Again, the partnership with industry and the work with the CETAs for specifically the NEET group and we cannot ignore that. That's part of our reality. A large number of our citizens not in employment or education and training, and then very specific objectives for a holistic focus on skills development in areas such as artificial intelligence and robotics. And I thought I would also emphasize that as this part of the plan, there's a focus on increased investments in neuroscience research, which will help us to better understand learning outcomes. So just in conclusion, Chair, I think just the point to emphasize, it's not the Department of Science and Innovation's plan, it's everyone's plan. We've just been asked by our government to lead it. It's really what we want to ensure that through investment in science, technology, and innovation in education, we achieve greater impact. And to do that, we need to improve the governance. We need to have better policy direction and certainly more efficient funding. And I think just like you said and others have said, we are well aware that South Africa doesn't lack good plans or good strategies. We have many of those. It's about the implementation. And I think also for that, we will really need the proverbial Team South Africa support. And I certainly look forward to the questions and discussions this afternoon, because that is what we need to enhance and shape our plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daan, and thank you for that input. And it's really is the Decadal Plan really does provide us with the basis of for pulling together, if you like, and bringing all the different sectors into sync, if you like, to address our massive grand challenges, if you like. There are a couple of questions, but I think what we'll do is hold them until the end of the session. So it's going to be a pleasure for me now to welcome Professor Peter Mbati to take over as chair. He's a parasitologist. He's published in many scientific journals on immune parasitology and diagnostics. He's worked in medical diagnostics. He's a fellow of the Japanese international, what is it called, JICA? I can't remember what it stands for now. But just to welcome you, Professor, and of course he's the Vice-Chancellor at the moment at Sepako Mogato Health Sciences University. Professor Mbati, over to you.
Many thanks, Prof. Bawa, and thank you very much for chairing that session exceptionally well. And again, we must thank the speakers, Prof. Marwala, Dr. Obokoh, and Mr. Daan Toit. You've set now the scene for us to get to, the responses from our various respondents. We have three very distinguished members who will serve as respondents. The first one is Dr. Stanley Mpofu. Now, Dr. Mpofu is the chairperson of Higher Education Information Technology South Africa, and he's also the Chief Information Officer at VETS. Details of his biography are presented to us in the booklets that we received earlier. So Dr. Mpofu, I'll give you an opportunity, like we said earlier, about 8 minutes. And then after that, we may take a question or two, then move to the next respondent. So Dr. Mpofu, most welcome.
Good afternoon, esteemed profs and the chairperson. I just want to make sure that I'm relevant to this conversation. What area would you want me to focus on in the conversation, Prof?
So, Dr. Mpofu, it is really, it's really up to you. You know, with the presentations that we've received, you know, the introduction Prof. Marwala and the team.
Yes. Okay.
You are most welcome to pick on anything that you'd like to share with the team.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think I want to start with the items that were raised by Prof. Marwala, and I'm feeling very proud that today I'm able to see him directly, because I've always followed him privately when he writes some articles that have something to do with technology. Now, I remember one of the things he mentioned was this issue of muting. Maybe on a lighter note, Prof. Marwala, perhaps we need some AI developments to address the muting issue that you raised. But I want to go back and look at issues around technology in terms of AI, Internet of Things, robotics, coding, data science, and perhaps design thinking also as part of the package in terms of helping people with having innovative ideas. Now, if I look at the situation in South Africa, maybe for your own interest, colleagues, I'm actually connecting from a rural place called Utrecht in Natal. And I'm surrounded by poverty, which has already been spoken about a lot by Prof. Marwala. Now, when one looks at issues around unemployment, I think it's crucial that maybe we do consider elements like interns as part of the process of developing skills within a specific environment. And when I'm talking about interns, I'm talking about some collaboration that could happen between the industry and the universities or any other areas which teaches technology, so that the practical part that normally is a challenge for people, because when they look for employment, the first thing they're asked is what kind of experience or how many years of experience does one have? And only the opportunity of exposing these young people to an internship is something that I consider crucial. Well, I may share with you selfishly that since I joined VETS in 2017, I've probably produced more than 150 interns who come into ICT. We've got collaboration with companies that provide ICT training, and we use those as an opportunity for them to actually gain the skills that they may want when they go out there. And the majority of them have been employed through that process. Now, the other question that's always, and I'm biased, I must confess, because I grew up in the rural areas. I got into town through the education process. But what I find is that when we talk about all of these things, the question is, are we also considering that rural areas can also be developed enough that people do not have to aspire to go to Joburg or to go to Cape Town or to go to Durban to find employment, as well as create a right atmosphere where entrepreneurship can also be done within these rural areas? Because in the majority of cases, you find that when the students are in class, particularly in the rural areas, their focus is, when I finish my matric, I go to university, and then I'll go to get a job in Joburg and other flashy areas. I think it's important that all these decisions that government does, and with including the universities in terms of their planning, it should encompass how do we distribute this new economy that we want to, this 4IR economy that we want to venture into, by making sure that it is distributed across the board. In other words, you'll be able to create your own technology hub in the mountains here in Utrecht, or you can also do the same in Daan, in any other place, other than always thinking of making a hub somewhere in a city. Then it draws everybody into the city. It looks like rural areas then become a place of neglect to some extent. And when we talk about 4IR and you look at the environments that are, say, in the, I'm probably going to talk more about my experience in the rural areas where you find schools, in high schools, where pupils, students in that space have never had the opportunity to use computers. So if computers are only going to be accessible at a time when someone goes to varsity, I believe that is actually too late. And one also looks at if I put the industry on one side and the institutions, I look at that and think, well, are the institutions producing the right degrees? I've got relatives that have completed certain degrees, but they can't get jobs because they're told your degree is not relevant and so forth. The question is, are these degrees actually very relevant to the industry or to the world out there, such that if someone completes it and goes out, then they are seen as a person who has acquired the right skill so that they could add value to the industrial sector out there. So these are some of the challenges that I see. I've got questions that I'll ask later specifically for the speakers. I think the majority of the things that I have were more of comments. Like, for example, if you think of 4IR, how do we preach 4IR in the absence of infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure? If that basic is not there, we can talk about 4IR, but one needs to consider that there are certain basic things that have to be in place. Whether it was a student at a university that is going to be given data, but they go into a location or into a space where there is no infrastructure from Vodacom, from Telkom, then it becomes something that is really, that does not help. And that's why I subscribe to the thinking of Prof. Marwala when he says he prefers that say the education sector as a whole, for example, has its own spectrum. And these are the kind of things that I would think when they get sponsorship and partnership and you put that infrastructure in place, then we can start talking about elements that we need for us to develop on the 4IR road. I think for now, because I have a lot of questions that I put, for now, Prof, I can stop here. Let's see if there's something else that you want me to venture into.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mpofu. You do raise, I think, fundamental issues that we would have to respond appropriately to entrench the 4IR as we know it in the school system. And I know we are mainly focusing today on the post-school educational system. My view is that these are things that need to start right from the basic schooling levels, so that by the time, as you correctly say, our students get to university, they are appropriately inducted, as it was, in the kind of technology that we are talking about. So thank you very much, Dr. Mpofu. We then have our next respondent, Mr. Sikumbuzo Ngobo, who is a director for public sector, Microsoft South Africa. You are welcome. We look forward to. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity representing Microsoft and contributing to the conversation that is very close to the business that we have an interest to invest in. And all protocol observed to the professors and the speakers that were able to give us the open context of the fourth industrial revolution. I think listening to the speakers from a policy position, looking at the challenges that are facing the country, I think we need to frame the challenge that we have an exponential problem that requires an exponential solution. The mistake that we have tend to do is to convert the old, trying to build the new and hope for the new results. And COVID-19 has shown us that we are not ready in any material sense. Some of the initiatives we had to overlook the lack of policy thereof so that we are able to get into different platforms. And I think where we are from an economic position, from the current exponential challenges that we have an opportunity that we need to capitalize on, but we need to capitalize at scale. And therefore we need to prototype whilst we drive policy formulation. What do I mean by that? There are a few things that the speakers touched upon. One of the things that we focused on the universities, as the speakers were articulating what the role the universities we can play. We then frame a digital community, because we need the universities, we need the community. We need the infrastructure, but more importantly, we need an enabling infrastructure. We have an opportunity to build an education platform for citizens in this country, that all universities must be able to push the education content which students or citizens on a regular basis can get to access and do some light training as part of building the skills and the capability. As Microsoft, we have two critical programs that I think are critical for this conversation. One is what we frame Enterprise Skilling Initiative, which is a global program that we are rolling out in South Africa. We've partnered and launched with Eastern Cape government. Walter Sisulu University was part of the initiative. But how do we make sure that we create a scale in terms of training the youth and the unemployed to make them 4IR ready? And what do we mean by 4IR ready? Fully support that we need to have spectrum for education sector, but to do what? What platform do we have in place that we have opened up for our communities, for our citizens, in order to show government that when we talk emerging technologies, when we talk skilling on the back of the platform, these are platforms we are building. We are inviting industries to push their industry-specific training content in this platform. And therefore, in that way, we are skilling at scale. We are owning the platform that is patented as Republic of South Africa Education Platform. We have another opportunity to look at the country cloud and the AI. Microsoft is rolling out a very big plan. AI is becoming critical to create efficiencies. AI is becoming critical to be the backbone and the engine of our back office and front office. If we talk AI, machine learning, and the cloud platforms, we have an opportunity to look at government services. As universities, we can lead that front and look at what services specifically that government can take into digital platforms and allow citizens to access them, whether via the web, whether via application, whether via SMSs, via social media. The reality is the citizens are on digital platforms. That's the reality we are faced with. And we are following the citizens that are already utilizing some of these digital platforms. There are services that, from a commission point of view, that I think there's an opportunity for universities, because they are in communities collaborating with the commission to say critical services that are citizens facing. We can take those services into digital platform. What do I mean by that? We are creating a market by creating a platform that will look at driving licenses, home affairs services, and look at a number of them, whether we talk health records. And this will help us to energize the youth, to innovate where they are, use university as a platform to be able to drive that innovation, because the opportunity is now. And yes, the issue of funding is a question. We have a lot of venture capitalists in South Africa that we should bring them on board as partners to avail the resources that they have in order to drive this innovation. The biggest challenge, once we have skilled the youth, once the youth gets it, once the citizens gets it, what are these opportunities we are talking about? What market are we creating for the skills that we want to drive? So these things that are intertwined. Once we drive the Enterprise Skilling Initiative or the Citizen Skilling Initiative through education platform, but we also need to pay attention in creating the market that will absorb them. Because we do need to look at what are the drivers of our economy. We look at agriculture. Maybe I'm biased because I'm an agriculturist by profession. How do we integrate the small farmers and the commercial farmers? What platform do we have that gets them into the same supply chain so that all the localized suppliers will be able to get to this platform and start sourcing, whether you're a small scale farmer, whether you're an established farmer. In that way, we are creating a singular economy. There was an old concept of the established economy and also the informal economy. How do we integrate the two into a single economy? And this the emerging technologies, they are helping us to do that. If you look at the companies that have been established in the last 10 years, are companies that never existed before, are companies that are born on the back of venture capitalists, companies that are born out of research and innovation. Universities, they have a critical role to play in partnering with industries to drive the scale, because the only way to make impact is to make sure our initiatives are coordinated. This structure is a platform that should own some of these initiatives. As we're approaching COVID-19 wave 4, what is our position? Are we closing the university down? Are we disrupting the calendars? Are we going to see the debates between the unions and the Department of Education? How do we make sure that we create the platform that will feed content, whether we have wave 2, whether we have wave 3, or whether we overcome COVID, but have a platform that enables the citizen to train and skill on daily basis. And I think once we establish that coordination and partnership and utilize the already available resources, I think we will take a step further towards driving the fourth industrial revolution. Already they are talking about 5.0, because the emerging of these technologies, they are going to a next level. And lastly, Chair, the issue of muting, I think we've resolved it with the launch of Windows 11, which enables teams now to have a capability to sense you and be able to mute and unmute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bobo, for your insights. I think from Microsoft, certainly, you are the drivers, I think, or part of the drivers of this fourth industrial revolution. So thank you very much. We will then take our third respondent, Mr. Wayne Adams. Mr. Adams is the CEO of MASITA, which stands for Manufacturing, Engineering, and Related Services Sector Education and Training Authority. And I think in some of our earlier presentations, I think by Mr. Toit, the role of the SITAs, I think, was really brought up as critical in terms of this ecosystem that we need to drive to really get the fourth industrial revolution benefits experience, particularly in our higher education sector. So, Mr. Adams, welcome. We look forward to your 8 minutes.
Thank you, Prof. Mbati. I was waiting now for the about to speak, but unfortunately it failed. Good afternoon to everyone. And I must say I am fortunate in the sense that I'm not just amongst and good partners, but within this session. I'm not going to repeat what has been said, Prof. Safe to say that I agree with the contributions made by the esteemed speakers around the issues of 4IR and the future of work, the future world of work, which requires a different skill sets. Now, the minister earlier in his address spoke about the role of universities in the production of and supply of skilled professionals. And there I say, Prof. Mbati, that this should include our TVET sector. It also should include our basic education sector, because we need to build our pipeline from basic education up to the TVET colleges and hopefully achieve a seamless progression into higher education institutions. And of course, to enable us to do so, we need to, hopefully by building our own infrastructure, we will have the delivery mechanism to address some of the challenges that we are faced with when it comes to the issues of 4IR. Our own research within the MASITA, of course, also supports and identified 4IR is a key driver, and this applies to all six subsectors of the Merseyta, not to the same extent, but in one way or another, which clearly indicates there is a huge need for these skills. And of course, my presentation or my response this afternoon will relate to the first outcome within the Presidential Commission for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which talks to human capital, because it's the human capital that's going to assist us not only in being competitive, but also to assist us with dealing with the huge unemployment rate that our country is faced with. What is encouraging is that in most of the countries where this new technologies have been adopted, and I know there was a concern at one stage by our labor constituency that it's going to reduce the workforce. But what is surprising is that in most of those countries, the unemployment rate is very, very, very small. But it's also because of their ability to compete on a global scale, and hopefully by embarking on these processes, we would be in a position to do so ourselves. The minister also in his address this morning identified 10 cross-cutting initiatives that relates to, of course, the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, and the 4 that I've identified, which I believe could be incorporated in what it is that we intend to do when it comes to human capital development, is the short skills programs, is the workplace-based learning, entrepreneurship, development programs, and of course also programs to respond to the occupational and as well as the skills gap. One of our biggest challenges, and this is what we've experienced within the CETA world, is the pace and the time taken with regards to curriculum development, particularly at the intermediary level. That's most probably between NQF level 2 and NQF level 5. We need to find ways to significantly fast track, and purely based on the fact that technology is not going to wait for us to come up with the required curriculum or skills programs. It's going to run past us, and we will once again be lagging behind. So that's something that we need to seriously consider and find a way to fast track. I think when we talk about the unemployed workforce, we mustn't lose sight. This is important. We mustn't lose sight of the current workforce, which may find themselves within these companies where you have the changes within technology, and somewhere, somehow, we need to build in the either reskilling or upskilling of our current workforce to take up these new opportunities. Now, I have no doubt that embarking on this journey is not necessarily going to translate in an increase in our unemployment rate. It will most certainly, and I think the reports seem to suggest that indeed it will reduce the unemployment rate within our country. So we will have to as a matter of urgency, find ways to fast track some of these initiatives that relates to the fourth industrial revolution. And I think our biggest challenge, and most probably not so much within the higher education sphere, but particularly within the TVET colleges, is the ability by those TVET colleges to embark on some of these initiatives. Now, as the Merseyta, we have embarked about 2 or 3 years ago on a project, and it's a pilot project to establish a learning factory which is based on the 4IR technologies within one of the TVET colleges, and of course, when successful, the intention is to expand it into the other provinces. And we are fortunate in that sense that we have as a partner in assisting us, or in assisting the actual college on this initiative, the CGIAR. So we will have to, and I think this is the important issue. We need to find ways, and I want to re-emphasize this, to create this a level of urgency to deal with some of the challenges that we experience. Now we also, perhaps this relates to Mr. De Toit's presentation. We welcome, as the Masita, we welcome the idea of partnerships. I think as the Masita, we are fortunate that we have a number of partnerships with the higher education institutions or universities across the country, and partnerships has been and will continue to be the vehicle that we use as the Masita to fulfill our mandate. And hopefully this partnership will begin to assist in addressing the societal challenges that you refer to within your presentation. The last point is, and this is where we need to look at in ensuring the relevance of the kind of training that we want to embark upon. And of course, as the Masita, and I would want to believe that I, on this particular issue, speak on behalf of the CETA fraternity. We want to do something urgently, and we need to find ways to link this to those 10 cross-cutting technology or initiatives that the Minister spoke about earlier. I'm going to stop there. Prof. Umbati, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adam. You've covered it really within the time frame. You know, riding from what you've indicated on the previous speakers, certainly the 4IR brings disruption at very many levels. At the school levels, whether it is the curriculum, at university levels, beyond just the curriculum, it's issues around the investment that institutions need to make to ensure that the 4IR principles are appropriately, the uptake is appropriate, but also the labor market itself. In institutions now, we talk about creating jobs that don't even exist because you have to prepare students for that job market. And the 4IR, I think, presents precisely that disruption. Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. And I don't know how you will, the disruption that is going to bring to Masita also, because I see engineering getting into things like biotechnology, and whether that are issues that later you'll want to look at as you define, where Masita supports is something I think we would have conversations at a later stage. Oh, thank you very much. I really want to thank all the respondents who have presented within the time frame that we provided. I do not know whether we have any questions from the delegates who are attending. We'll be happy to take. Yes, Prof. Bawa. Yes, Prof. Bawa, should I hand over to you?
Sorry, Professor Martin. No, please continue. I just wanted to say that there aren't any questions in the chat. And I know that Dr. Bofu had a few questions, so perhaps we can ask him to raise them now.
Yes. Thank you very much, Prof. Bawa. Yes, Stanley, you had a couple of questions, I think, which you wanted to present to the various speakers. Maybe you could direct one at a time to each of the earlier speakers. Yeah, so welcome, Stanley.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof, and appreciate the time. My first questions I'm posing to Prof. Marwala. And I think I can just ask them. He can then choose, maybe if it's not, he can prioritize what he thinks is important instead of me deciding. So I'll just ask the question. So my first question was, what relationship is there between institutions of higher education and private sector or corporate world? And I'm asking this in the context of the syllabuses that the universities produce vis-a-vis when the people graduate, are they certain that there is opportunities out there or not? In other words, is there a relationship? Does the corporate world give the universities the type of kind of syllabus that they would prefer that would then help in terms of unemployment? I think that was one part. The second part I want to ask him is, investing in technology comes with many myths. I work in the technology space, and I'm putting this across. It comes with many myths and fears from the current population. And when I talk about current population, I'm talking about people who are in the adult space or towards maybe above 40 and so forth, who are currently the people who make the decisions in most of the places. How do we overcome this in terms of addressing the conservatism that may be present among that age group? And I think, let me see, that is used for good. I think this is just a comment or perhaps a question that I would pose to say, do you agree that there is need for coordination in all aspects of life, starting with education, as well as the industry sector, so that there is some synergy in what is happening, starting from education right through to when people finish varsity or whatever format of education that they would have done? Because I don't think it's all about varsity. People can learn coding after grade 12 and they will be able to add value. People can learn, there's some things that are not rocket science in terms of learning, such that maybe some opportunities should also be created for things like coding, for example, where one can still do that without having gone to varsity. I think for now I can stop there. I think I didn't have many questions for Dr. No, I think I've got questions for Dr. Obokoh, and I didn't have many questions for Mr. Dean du Toit. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Stanley. Prof. Marwala, you could respond.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mpofu, and thank you very much, Professor Mbati, for basically leading us through this session. Now, the question the first question is university corporate world relationship. I think we do have quite a number of best practices that ensures that ideas that are in the private spaces in the corporate world come to university. One of the instruments that I can think of are the industrial advisory boards that you will see when you go to, certainly I see them in the Faculty of Engineering, where you will get people who come from industry who will be advising. And the advice can vary from curriculum, the content of the curriculum, to how do we make universities actually the center of business. Because what is actually becoming much more apparent is that universities are increasingly taking the formation of businesses. If you look at some of the big universities in North America, they really are businesses. I mean, you look at Harvard, you look at Stanford, these are huge business enterprises. And in South Africa, there is an attempt for that. And I can think of here at University of Johannesburg, UJ Invent, which is an instrument meant to commercialize the university enterprise, VETS enterprise at VETS, research at UP, many of these. So, and the relationship between industry and universities is quite healthy. But on the issue of curriculum, we should actually understand that the role of university is more than just to supply the current skills needs of corporate. The role of a university is to educate so that the people who come out of universities will be able to operate even in the era of the skills that we do not even know about today. I think that is actually quite important. So instead of universities, certainly at the core of the curriculum of their programs, being just tools for creating the current skills demands, we do have instruments to be able to deal with that. For example, we have short learning programs, which are not necessarily subsidized, which are there to make sure that there is training that is addressing a specific need of industry. Now, the issue of coordination is very important. I spent quite a great deal of time in China, and we all agree that the coordination that happens in China between universities, between industries and university has been beneficial to China. I don't advocate the idea of having commissars or party officials that are overseeing the activities of universities. I think coordination must be done within the ethos of openness, because one aspect of universities that is very important, and this is very important for innovation, is the openness, so that ideas can flow freely without fear or favor. And if you close that openness, then obviously it is against our principle as a university, but as a university sector. But also it closes the space for coming up with ideas that we have not seen. Now, specifically on coding, I completely agree with you. We do make coding much more sophisticated than it is. I'm not a big advocate of people learning how to code too early. I believe that for anybody to be able to learn how to code, they just need 3 core skills. The first one is the ability to code, to communicate in English, because the syntax, whether it is Java, whether it is C++, whether it is Python, is all in English. So the ability to understand key concepts in the English language is very, very important for coding. The second one is the ability to manipulate numbers. I mean, issues such as matrices, arrays, and all those things that are quite common in coding, are easily disseminated through mathematical concepts. Vector calculus, for example, it's a good example for that. And then the third, which is not quite clear where it fits into our school curriculum, is the ability to think logically. Flow charts, we don't have enough flow charts in our schooling system so that we can be able to understand how things flow. The ordering of things is very, very important. It's a key skill to teach people how to code, or to prepare them to learn how to code in any computer language that might emerge now or in the future. And I couldn't quite get the question on the conservatism of a specific age group, but all I can say is that even though rigid rules are quite important when you're organizing any organization, there is quite a great deal of knowledge that is emerging. And I think Google, the workplace of Google is a good example of how open spaces and thinking outside the box are beneficial for creating a culture of creativity and innovation. Thank you very much.
Marwala, I know that this is an area you have great passion, and if we gave you a whole afternoon, we maybe wouldn't even do justice. So thank you very much, Prof, for responding to the question from Dr. Mpofu. If you allow me, colleagues, I would like to really express a very sincere appreciation to, first of all, the chair of the first session, Prof. Bawa, for really introducing our speakers. And then great appreciation to Prof. Marwala, Dr. Obokoh, I think, who I'm not sure if she's still with us, and Mr. Toit, thank you very much. And then, of course, to our respondents, you did a great job, to be able to decipher what the speakers have said and to be able to put certain views across. So Dr. Stanley Mpofu, thank you very much. Mr. Ntobo, our great appreciation. And just to be able to make sure that I get the third respondent, Mr. Wayne Adams. Thank you very much. And I think, Prof. Bawa, it's only right that I ask you probably to do a final wrap up, because I know that there was a team behind all this work that you were doing. And maybe it might be just appropriate, Ahmed, that I ask you to also convey and acknowledge the team that was really working in the background to allow us to have this very successful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you for chairing that session. And I want to just thank the presenters and the respondents for their input. And absolutely correct. I think we have to thank Nora Clark and Sana Boshoff and Francis Zoa for supporting us in this event. I mean, I think it's went off very well. And of course, the team here at UP, which kind of helped us as well. So thank you very much, Peter. And I just by going away comment was just to say how much how many opportunities there are for us to really engage the universities with this new technology moment we are in. And I think one of the most critical issues, it seems to me, is the issue raised by Skumbozo, which was to raise the issue about the articulation between what happens in our education systems and what happens in the labor market. And I think that that's a major issue that we have to take up. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to everybody. It was a really interesting session and lots to kind of to mull over. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a good evening.